Welcome in, builders. It's time for us to return to nature, to get in touch with our roots, but I don't want to be uptight about it, so let's have a good time. Let's go with Pangaea, Age of Revelry. This is a fun nation. This is a nation that I think a lot of people gravitate towards when they start playing because they're just fun. You get minotaurs, you get centaurs, dryads. They're a very fun, non-human nation, and maybe they could be a bit straightforward, but they got tons of tricks and lots of tools in their toolbox. With the coming of Dominion 6, we have traded out some pathing so that we have some glamour access, which is always handy, and we have a decent amount of nature glamour, which do share a couple crosspath spells. So if you'd like to try your hand at using some elf shot, this would be a great nation for that. All right, so let's check out what makes these guys so party happy that they are ready to start a revelry. Pangaea is a woodland nation inhabited by wild beings connected with nature. Half-men such as satyrs, centaurs, and minotaurs serve the lords of the sacred groves deep in the forest. The expansion of civilized nations has forced the beasts of Pangaea to arm themselves with man-made weapons. Minotaurs wield huge battle axes. Centaurs are trained to use spears and longbows. The magic of the Pangaea lures women into the forests where they turn wild and shed all their clothing. These women are called maenads and are turned loose to fight humans with their bare hands and teeth. So things get pretty wild in Pangaea. For national features, we are forest beings, stealthy troops, troops that heal battle afflictions. So several things going on here right off the bat. Forest beings, we can get some of our satyr troops in any forest that we control. We also can get our satyr commander and I believe our black harpies. Yes, all of our black harpies in any forest. And black harpies are great scouts, so that's a nice bonus there. We have stealthy troops. Some of our centaur warriors and others are stealthy, which is very powerful. While we're not individually as powerful as maybe a Heim troop, a Vanir or something like that, satyrs are still pretty good, and we've got some neat little tricks up our sleeves that bolster their abilities. And finally, we have troops will heal battle affliction. So all of our troops have recuperation. This ability allows you to heal afflictions over time. Recuperation loses its effect once a unit gets old. So if you have a guy who gets a limp, you can recuperate that. It's just like having a healer with your army. And it's on, I believe, all of our troops. So that is very powerful. For sacreds, one of the ways that even a good sacred tends to get worn down over time is you just pile up afflictions. Just a lucky hit hits you and you get a limp. And then you die on the march, or you get a chest wound, and then you get battle fright, and then it just stacks up. Well, we can heal that. Big tramplers like our minotaurs, or other centaur cavalry-like units, they all tend to just pile up afflictions. And your weaker troops, if they survive a hit, tend to get an affliction. So it is very nice that all of our troops can just auto-heal that. And that makes it very new player friendly. If you don't understand why you're taking extra attrition or ways that you could possibly try to counter some of that, or just the need to have more reinforcements on the way when you play with squishier units. Very nice bonus to have. For our military, we have satyrs and minotaur infantry, centaur archers, and warriors. So we don't have a huge selection here. We do have a little bit of trickery up our sleeves, but for the most part, we've got melee satyrs with a little bit of javelins. We've got a mix between ranged and spear, essentially call them cavalry, no offense meant, and minotaurs, which are decent troops, but tend to kind of get hacked up, at least these early age ones. So a good spread of units, I would say, usable to good. For magic, we have magical tunes, and that's some of our national spells we will take a look at. We have nature magic, which is very strong. We have some earth magic, some glamour magic, some blood magic. We are not really a blood nation, so don't get your hopes up there. And a little bit of water. We can conjure bramble forts. Bramble forts are another national spell. We will look at that when we get there, but just know that we're able to summon forts in forests. So between that and how we can get our troops from extra forests, forests are exceedingly important for us. Our priests are average, can perform blood sacrifices, and when they say average, our highest priests are, not him, are Holy Twos. Decent. Holy Twos are better, I would say, in Dominion 6 due to Blessing of Courage, I feel being better than it was in 5 due to having more troops that you need to keep in the fight, and we have okay access to that. We can perform blood sacrifices, meaning that we can take our blood slaves and we can sacrifice them at temples for extra temple checks. So again, we're not a huge blood nation. You could do a little bit of crafting, you could do a little bit of blood sacrifice. Our only blood hunter is this guy, and he's very expensive, so we're going to be pretty limited on that, but you do have the access, so if you had to, you could start quieting blood. For scales and blesses, we get an extra turmoil limit and an extra growth limit, which is very good for us. We quite like those scales. For our buildings, we only get primitive forts, meaning you build the first step and you can't build any more, and they are 50% more expensive. So you pay 1,500 gold for a level 1 fort. It does give you an extra commander point, so you do get your 2 commander point for recruitment, but that's it. They are pretty darn weak forts. That is a weakness. You don't like particularly being sieged. You would prefer to be the one sieging. We also get a very interesting bonus over here where our temples and labs cost 300 gold, so half price, in forests. So yet again, just emphasizing you've got to be in forests. You want every forest you can get your hand on, really. As for sites, in our capital, we have the Grove of Gaia. This gives us increases growth by a maximum of 3 in our capital. So our capital will always be pegged at high growth. We get 6 nature gems, and that is our only gem income. So very high, but we don't have a good spread. You only have the nature, which is unfortunate. I think for most nations, I think you'd prefer to have at least a little bit of a spread. But if you're going to have a mono gem, nature or death are probably your better two. Also gives us our cap-only sacred recruitment. Nothing overly special there. Although I guess the growth is interesting, but you're probably going to max out your growth scale anyways because growth is so good for you. Jumping into units, first thing we have here is an interesting one. We can recruit harpies in both our forts and in our forests. And while they're not particularly great, only 8 attack, 9 piercing damage, they are very cheap. 7 gold, 1 resource, 3 recruitment points. And they're stealthy flyers. So you can have harpies lead these guys around. They are not undisciplined, so you can hold an attack rear. They're not super impactful, but they are just a nice thing. Like, you could surprise somebody with some harpies and wipe out their mages, or just disrupt their archers or their formations while you have other things going on. And quite a good distraction force, and dirt cheap for it. And even with Talons having a low attack, we're only size 3, so you get 3 per square. You can actually harass penalty down units pretty decently, so you can actually get some hits in here. You may struggle with heavier armor, but good harassing unit. Next up, we have 4 flavors of satyr. Pretty similar generally, but each has kind of their own little thing going on here. So the satyr sneak, which can be recruited in all forests, is stealthy, has our forest survival, has our recuperation. They are undisciplined, and they cause unrest at 0.5 each, which is pretty darn high. So if you had 10 of these guys, that'd be 5 unrest every turn. Right away, you should be thinking, okay, you could get a stealth raid party of these guys and sneak in to the enemy territory, and while you're moving around, you'll cause some unrest, and then you could pop out and take some territory. And that totally works. They're using a bronze spear. 10 attack is, it's okay. 14 damage is pretty decent. We have slightly above human strength and slightly above human defense and slightly above human HP. So overall, a pretty decent guy. Cheap 936 is a very cheap unit. He's only got basically a bronze spear and some furs. One thing of note, if you're trying to raid humans, a human will, if they're paying attention, they'll probably notice this weird unrest thing moving around their territory, and they're obviously going to know they're playing against a Pangaea and what that probably means. So Against humans, it's still good, but just know that you're not fooling anybody. They probably know what's going on there. But good unit, and you can surprise attack people out of stealth. Stealth 60 is pretty darn good. Very usable, good at what they're trying to do. Next up, we just have the Satyr, can be recruited in all forests, and it's essentially that guy, but he grabbed a javelin and he settled down a little bit, so he's not going to cause the unrest. These guys are just fine. I think of the two, I probably prefer this troop because I like the javelins. You can get enough of them to just get a critical mass and just get a couple good throws off. With our strength 11, we get an extra tile of range on that. 13 pierce damage is fine on a javelin. Very usable troop. You would use him generally for your stealth rating. Next up, we have the Satyr Warrior. This guy is kind of your line infantry, if you can be said to have one. Same gear, but we have a shield now. We trade out our javelin. So we can actually soak a little bit of arrow. We don't have a helmet, unfortunately. We do have one natural protection, but one natural protection is not going to save you from getting shot in the head with an arrow. 14 HP, 11 strength, 11 attack, 15 defense. Now that includes some shield parry stuff there. But good enough unit. You don't really want to do grindy line combat with these guys, but they're what you're going to have to maybe soak arrows or just be your front line so that other things can stay behind them. For the last of our Satyr units, we have the Reveler. These guys are pretty good. I like these units. We are paying a lot more now. 16, 3, 14 is quite a lot more than some of those earlier ones, but we're getting what we pay for. We keep our stealth. We now have Berserk +3. With 15 HP, there's decent odds that you'll take a hit and go Berserk. And for low HP Berserking troops, one of their big weaknesses is, even if you then win, you probably picked up an affliction when you got hit. Well, we can recuperate that. So it's not as bad as it otherwise would be. And we have Berserk 3, which is very good. So we'd go up to 15 strength and 14 attack skill. And that's compounded by, we actually have 2 attacks. So a 14 attack, 18 damage pierce, and 14, 15 damage blunt attack. Very respectable. We have a length 3, so we can still maybe get some repels off, but a second attack is always valuable. Very, very valuable. We're still size 3, so we still have 3 to a square. 6 attack density coming out of a square is great. These guys are quite good. They do have that same cause unrest, so just know you don't really want these lingering around in your own territory particularly. You want to get them and get them out to go into your enemy's territory and cause him problems. So, nice troop. Very nice troop. A cheapish good fighter. Like against a just normal human for the same cost, you'll probably win because you have 2 attacks. Next up, we start in on our Centaur troops. We have 2 versions of essentially archers. We have the Centaur, so can be recruited in all forests and our forts. 25 gold is pricey for an archer, just right off the bat, but only 4 resources, 12 recruitment points. Now do note you are size 5, so you're only getting 2 per square, so a little difficult to get your buffs out on. However, we come in with 13 strength and a longbow. Longbows are perfectly serviceable to good bows in the early age. And if something gets to him, while he only has 3 protection, he has 13 defense, which isn't terrible, and he actually has 2 melee attacks. So they're all right. You know, you don't want to let like some medium or heavy cav get to these guys, but you know, some light infantry slips around or some wolves or something, they can take care of themselves okay. And with the longbow, with 13 strength, you could buff them with the poison arrow buffs and have a decent odd of doing some damage and getting that to proc. A pretty good troop. Your second version of that would be the Centaur Ride, which is a female centaur. Same requirements for recruitment. She trades out her... Oh, let's actually back up a second. One of the notable things about a centaur is they do have 12 precision. That's high precision. Most archers have 10 or 11. 12 is pretty darn good. So even though you're at super long range, you have the benefit of having higher precision on that. So you will be more accurate. The Centaur Ride changes out her longbow for only a short bow, which is 10 range shorter. So quite significantly shorter. She's also not quite as strong, so you're losing some of that damage, but you went up to 13 precision. And being a shorter ranged, higher precision is a compounding effect that the further your range is, the more effect it has on your precision. So by being shorter range and higher precision, it makes her much more accurate comparatively. So I generally do not get this troop. I find I want the longbow with the further range and the higher piercing power to try to usually get some poison damage off, but they are totally usable. They both have stealth, so if that's a thing that's useful to you, a small group of some satyrs backed up by maybe a couple of these for a raid party could do something. Although I would probably stick to just the satyrs so you don't friendly fire yourself a whole bunch, but usable troops. Usable troops. I like the longbow guy. Next up, we have the more cavalry version. I think I'll start with the Centaur Warrior for this set. This is the same chassis. However, now we've put on some barding. We have grabbed a cap, so you know my love of wearing hats. And we have a shield. So while this isn't like super heavy barding or anything, it's only 7. Remember, we do have a little bit of natural protection, so we end up with 11 on the head and 9 on the body. Totally fine for like a light medium cavalry unit. Combat speed 29 is great. That's a fast unit. You want to get around the line and hit the rear? These guys are great at that. You have 14 strength and a light lance, so you get that first hit charge bonus. So you will probably get a kill on that. Most things do not like 17 piercing damage with a first hit charge bonus. Very nice there. And you do have a second attack. So again, compared to a normal light infantry with a light lance, you'll do about the same on the charge, but if you're in grindy combat, you have a second attack, which is quite valuable. In addition, Berserker 3. So if you do happen to take a hit, you will go up to 17 strength and 13 attack value. Very good. One of, I would say, probably the best, what I would class as like medium cavalry. One of the best. Just good all-around stats. He has a hat. He has a shield. We are using an actual lance and not just a spear. We have Berserk. With 22 HP, you can take a couple hits to go Berserk. And with recuperation, you can heal the afflictions you get while doing that. And all that on a non-animal. You don't have to worry about your animals with their low magic resist. You have 13, perfectly fine. 12's a fine morale, and on a very speedy chassis. So I like this troop. However, the Centauride Warriors also are pretty good. She didn't put on a hat. I guess she doesn't want to mess up her hair. Understandable, I suppose. She has a javelin, though, and that can be kind of nice, too. Again, you would probably be, like, flanking and doing that, or what I tend to use these for is to group up with my Sacreds in the early game, who also have javelins, just to bulk up their numbers a little bit. While your Sacreds are very powerful, you generally don't have enough in the early game, and this will help bulk out those lines a little bit. So, totally usable. If you want just their pure value as a medium cav, I think I like the Centaur Warrior more than the Centauride Warrior, but I think this is to flavor. Minor stat differences aside, the javelin's useful enough. You still have 2 attacks. You don't have a lance, so you do just have the bronze spear. So that is a penalty, a pretty heavy one. Getting that first hit kill is always nice, where you can just delete something and maybe get the numbers advantage, or maybe just get a lucky morale roll and wipe the enemy unit to have them retreat. You can chase them down. So, usable unit. Weigh your pros and cons in your situation for what you would like to use. Next up, we have the Minotaur. 2 varieties, very similar. This guy is undisciplined and 9 attack. This guy is 10 attack and disciplined. He also, I believe he put on more armor. Yeah, this guy's wearing furs, your undisciplined unit, whereas your Minotaur Warrior is wearing a halberd, ending up with 9 protection, so 11 on the body really, and 4 on the head. These guys are all right. They tend to wear themselves out really bad because they're tramplers. They're size 4 tramplers. They do have Berserk 5, so you could go up to 22 strength and 14 attack skill, so 15 on your attack with your bronze battle axe. I like these guys. They're a bit pricey at 50 gold, 7 resources, 18 recruitment. So you're never, well, you can, but you're going to struggle to get that many out. I tend to go high turmoil, high sloth, so my money is not the best, my resources are not the best. But these guys are nice. If you have the right target for them, they can dominate. And the right target is things that they can trample that aren't too killy, because we've only got 8 protection and 27 HP, or things that are big and you need to hit for 29 damage, 29 slashing damage. So you'll probably get through their armor, and then you'll get that 25% extra damage bonus from a slashing weapon. Other giants, in the test game behind us here, I've been fighting Muspelheim, because of course I have, and these guys did fine against their giants. They hit hard enough to get through even that high protection when they're in heat, to do damage to them. Now, our magic resistance is lower, but we're still not animal level, so that's fine. Our morale is actually high, which is great. So good HP to take a hit, go berserk, good morale, so you won't retreat before that happens. I like these guys. As just a straight front line for grindy combat, not very good though. You'll have very low attack density, not great armor, not wearing a helmet, not with a shield. So again, you want to use these guys in the roles that they're good at, not just as a generic troop. For our last troop unit, we have the White Centaur. This is our cap-only sacred, and this is one of the best sacreds. Maybe that's hyperbolic, but it is a great sacred. He's got a lot going on for him. So we've already talked about the Centaur in various forms. It's a good chassis to start with. We keep our 29 combat speed, which is great. Good flankers, good at chasing things down, great there. We have really high map movement, another nice bonus. Sometimes you have a good sacred that's just slow, very slow. These guys can get around. At 55 gold, 12 resources, 29 recruitment points, they're not super cheap, but it is a cap-only sacred. So you could probably max this out every turn. In this game, I took Turmoil 3, Sloth 2, and I was able to get these guys out just fine. Not much else, but these guys came out just fine. We have our Stealthy. So you have Stealthy Sacreds. While we don't have a Holy 3 with easy access, we have plenty of Holy 2s. So maybe 10 of these guys led by a Stealthy Holy 2 to do some raiding. Very viable. Berserk 3 is great. Add 3 to all those attack values and damage values. That's great. And recuperation. One of the big weak points of really good sacreds is attrition from taking afflictions. And again, we can just heal those off. We're smart enough to be wearing the better armor. We've got our cap on. We've got a good shield. Our defense is 17, which is high enough that things will struggle to hit us generally. And you'll probably want to take a bless that affects that somehow. We do have 2 attacks, so if you went with some sort of damage bless, that's good. Hint, Blood Surge is amazing on these guys. We're not wearing too much armor that our encumbrance is super high, so we can do some grindy combat here. We've got a Javelin with good strength, so you could chuck that before you go into combat if you'd like to. Overall, not the most complicated thing. Like, we don't have tons of crazy abilities or anything, but it all comes together into a very powerful package. 23 HP is great. If you wanted to maybe try for a regen or something, you're going to be getting 3 HP per round with the high defense, which is a good combination to stay alive. And again, that combos really well with recuperation. Like, very solid unit. I can't overstate that. I think these guys are worth a good bless. I think this is a nation that your troops alone, while decent, don't have standouts. They're not like game-winning troops. But combine those with our good magic that we'll look at and a very solid sacred. This is a good nation. So we have stealthy things. We have things that cause turmoil and unrest. We have a good sacred. This is a nation you want to be aggressive on, I think, early. And try to take territory, try to take forests. If you have a super weak neighbor and they don't seem to have something that could counter your centaurs, maybe even rush down a neighbor. In the game behind us here, I had Muspelheim. This is my capital. They started 2 away from me. And as you can see here, it's been a bitter war. I thought I had them, and then they pushed me off and went back and forth. It's been a bitter battle, but I've got them down to their capital, and I'm moving in all these forces to put an end to the giant menace. And this was my first target. I did a little bit of expansion, and then I just beelined him. He wasn't expanding too well, so I figured, well, let's go for it. As for our commanders, we have a decent smattering of different things, and for the most part, pretty darn useful. So first one up, we have a Black Harpy. This is a Harpy that has leadership, although it's only 10, is stealthy 60, so you have flying stealthy scouts. Very great combination there. This is a possibility for putting as your prophet. That would allow you a very high mobility Holy 3. However, it is a very fragile unit. Only 8 HP, only 9 defense, 0 protection. So don't think that you're going to survive even an arrow hit. But otherwise, great. You can get them outside of your forts. You can get them in any forest. So in the early game, when you don't have tons of money, you could drop 35 gold on a flying stealthy scout. Sure, why not? Next up, we have our Satyr Commander. This is our cheapest stealthy commander. Now, note, he is only stealthy 40, not stealthy 60 like some of our troops. He only leads with a leadership of 50, so no penalty to morale, but only 2 squads, no formations. But we have undisciplined troops anyways, so he is perfectly capable of leading it. He does have a shield, which is nice, help him against some stray arrows. Otherwise, relatively unremarkable. But these guys are perfectly acceptable, especially because you can get them in any forest for leading your stealthy troops around, or ferrying troops, or if, like in this game, you have areas you need to fort that are not on forests, if you need to stop, build a fort, they totally can do it. 60 gold is not too much to pay for a commander like this. Next up, we have our Minotaur Lord. Can be recruited in all forests and forts. He is the Minotaur leader version of our Minotaur Warriors. Very similar stats here. 15 morale's good. He has 75 leadership, so better, but still no bonuses, no formations. He has the same Trampler, the same Berserk, same traits. He's fine. I do tend to like getting this guy if I'm going to lead Minotaurs. Just feels right. Makes it so that nobody can pick this out with, like, fire large monsters if you don't have anything else that's big, or things like that, or just the AI targeting him because he's your big HP guy. So I wouldn't bring him along to lead Satyrs. I would only bring him along really if I'm going to have other Minotaurs. These guys they're not really good enough to be a thug, but as a very light, like, thuggy chassis, they would be okay. Give this guy a better piece of armor, a shield probably, so he'll need a weapon. He can trample, though, so maybe just double shield or something. They could be interesting. Not going to be out there soloing provinces, though, I don't think. Next up, we have the Centaur Hierophant and the Centauride Hierophantide. Just like the previous troop versions, they're very similar with slight differences. The Centaur Hierophant wields his longbow, like his troop men do. He is a Holy One sacred unit, our standard kit. He is an inspirational leader, so while he is at only 50 leadership, he does give them a +1 morale. 7 research for only 68 gold, so we're right at that 10 gold per 1 research standard. And he gets a random between an earth or a nature. While I'm not in love with either of those, they're at least okay. So you could give yourself, like, some protection buffs, or some protection buffs and precision buffs. So getting eagle eyes on one of these guys for archery could be pretty good. I don't know if I'd spend gems or anything on it. It's not that good. But, I mean, if you've got one and he's going to be in battle anyways, maybe he goes along as one of the people blessing some of their troops, then at least he has something to do. He can bless, eagle eyes, and then fire his bow. That's fine. That's nothing wrong with that. Get your bless. Next up, we have his female equivalent in the Centauride Hierophantide, and she is very similar. She trades the short bow. She has the slightly lower physical stats with the better precision. Note, better precision on a mage is nice, and she gets a water and a nature. So very similar to him. I think the nature one is actually the better one still, but the water gives you some access to some other water spells. You could slime. I'm not sure there's a ton of water 1 great spells, but That's okay. These guys are your generic researchers, I think, for same 68 gold per year upkeep for 7 research. I think you can get either or. You could try to get these out early, maybe do some light site searching. They are stealthy, which is nice on site searchers. They're fine. Note, all of these can also be recruited in forests. So if you drop your lab temple, you can grab them if you don't want to afford it. Next up, we have the Dryad and the Dryad Mother. Now note, these ones do not just get forest recruit, you do need your full infrastructure. For the Dryad, Nature 1, Glamour 1, Holy 2. Other traits that she has, Awe 4, just generic Awe, and Beastmaster +1. And she's she has Seduction, so she is a Seducer, which is a upgraded version of Assassination, where you try to seduce a enemy commander. Now, she's not flying, so it has to be done on a border with your own territory. But if you succeed, then she will essentially retreat with the commander, and they will come over to your territory. Generally speaking, the other seducers we have looked at in early age have been very expensive mages. The Oranid from Arcus Folly, the Rakshasi, I believe it's the chassis name for Lanka. They're like 450, 500 gold slow to recruit mages. They're just too expensive. But at 260, I'm more open to the idea of making some seduction attempts. If I was going to do that, I do think it's worth giving her a smidgen of very cheap gear. I believe it's the cat amulet can help with your seduction. Maybe a handful of acorns to give her a bodyguard if the seduction fails and it turns into a normal assassination attempt. Having Nature and Glamour are great assassin paths because you could swarm or you could illusion whichever variety you've researched. So those are all pretty good. Some good self buffs, protection, blur, etc., etc. I like this chassis. It's good. It's not slow to recruit. It's not cap only. Pretty good. Next up, we have the Dryad Mother. Very, very similar. Her all went up to 5. She picked up Ivy Lord. So Ivy Lord is if you do summoning of Vinemen, you get 1 extra. So this is actually pretty good. I like Vinemen Ogres. So she would get an extra 1 if I was going to do that. Generally speaking, you'd probably want to craft the Ivy Crown to increase that bonus even further and just make it a very efficient spell. And since we get 6 nature gems per turn from our home site, and we have tons and tons of nature mages, so we'll probably search some more up. It's an okay use of nature gems, I feel. And otherwise, she is 170 gold per year upkeep for 13 research. So not an efficient researcher. She is still just normal recruitment, not slow to recruit though. And she does get a random of water, earth, or glamour. So you could have a glamour 2 mage, which could be pretty interesting. Do note we don't have any dark vision or anything natively, but sometimes it's still worth throwing those spells up if you just think it's going to hurt the enemy more than it's going to hurt you. We do have some very high defense centaurs, so maybe you're worth taking that penalty to attack for both sides, thinking it'll hurt them more than you. If you got the earth, not the best. You do have the glamour earth crosspath, which has some uses. We are another holy 2, so I think these are fine. I do probably get a couple of these until I get at least a glamour 2 to site search glamour 2 for me, because I do like glamour stuff. Otherwise, not the best thing ever. I think I would prefer the other one ahead of this. It should be noted, though, that she did go up to a quarterstaff and a hoof. So if she does, for some reason, end up in those assassination fights or whatever, she at least has 2 attacks. That's something. And finally, we have the Pan. Oh boy, we have the Pan. This is an early era mage. Look at this. Out of the box, Earth 1, Nature 4, Blood 1, and a random of Earth or Blood at 100%, and a 10% for Earth, Blood, and Nature. So with just a Thistle Mace, you can go up to Nature 5 and start casting globals. They are slow to recruit, so you're not going to have a ton of these, and they are very expensive. But A Nature 4 mage is incredibly powerful. You can cast your big buffs. If you get Earth 2, you can Earth power up and you can cast all your Earth buffs. And our troops would quite like Strength of Giants. They quite like getting extra protection from spells. They quite like getting Weapons of Sharpness or any buff we can give them. They quite like. And so he can do that pretty easily. They do have a very high upkeep at 364. This is a mage who can cast Transformation. It's a ritual that turns you into a random animal, essentially. There are some bad outcomes there that kind of screw him over. But if it works, then you don't have the upkeep anymore. So it can be pretty powerful for that. He is your Blood Hunter, especially if you get the Blood 2 guy. It would probably be worth doing a little light blood hunting. With blood, you can make the Armor of Thorns, which is a blood nature booster armor piece. You also can make I believe it's called the Blood Stone, which is the Earth temporary gem generator, which is very hard for a lot of nations. Earth and blood's a great cross path, but not a lot of people have it. And you do. So that is quite nice if you need to boost people up with that bonus gem. In addition to all of that, he has Animal Awe 3, so not super relevant. He does have 10 poison resist, which is nice just to have a resist. He's stealthy. He gives you a huge supply bonus because he has that much nature magic. He's a Beastmaster +3, so if you are going to be leading some summoned animals around, he's the guy to do it. And he is a monster summoner. So he summons in Maenads, the wild women that we talked about at the intro. And I will pop that on screen here so you can see what they look like. This is an incredibly normal human chassis. She's got 10 HP, 10 strength, 10 attack, 10 defense, 10 precision, 12 combat speed, 0 protection, 10 magic resist, 15 morale, which is a little on the high side, and all she has is a claw attack at length 0, attack 10, damage 10. So about as bog standard as you could possibly be. Now, they do have Berserk +1, and they are undisciplined. And no, they're not a true Pangaean troop, so they don't have our recuperation. But they are a free spawn unit on every pan, and we get more of them when we are in turmoil scales. So it reinforces going turmoil. I actually like these a decent amount. They just bulk out your troops. You have other undisciplined troops anyways. I tend to like to either shove these in front to eat charges or just those first couple rounds of combat, or put them way in the back and let them filter in and fill in holes or just survive until I want them for that first use. This is a troop that really would like some buffs. Like, if you give her Bark Skin, she already is way more annoying to get rid of. If you give her Strength of Giants, her damage is much better. She quite likes to get different... Any buffs you could possibly give her. This is not mindless or anything, so you can use them for siege chaff, you can use them to hold up walls at forts. A decent free spawn unit. You will never get enough pans, and thus you will never have as many Maenads as you would probably want, but they are a good unit. Of those commanders, who would I prophetize? That's a little bit of a hard one. There's an argument to be made about the Black Harpy. A flying prophet is always nice, but that is on an incredibly weak chassis. So the odds of just something bad happening and it dying are uncomfortably high. Otherwise, maybe you do a Mentor Lord. He is tough enough that you're not going to take a stray arrow and die. He can get his blessings out, and if somebody gets to him and starts poking him, he's not going to instantly die. He'll go berserk. He's well equipped, so he can fight back, and he has recuperation. So if your superstar obese prophet gets a limp, well, he can heal it, and then he'll be happy, and you'll be happy. And you won't be limping your way towards the last throne while you're trying to win before the tides overtake you. Hint, hint, go check out the Lanka stream. Otherwise, if I was going to do a mage, it would probably be a pan. Pans do cost 364 gold a year in upkeep, so getting rid of that without having to roll the dice on a transform ritual would be pretty good. It's hard to get these guys early, though. 455 gold is a large investment. With our half-price temples and lab, that's almost a temple lab combo that you're paying for a single mage. I think I would lean towards either a Pan or a Minotaur or a Harpy, depending on your situation. And you just have to make that call at what's the most useful at that time. Next up, we do have some heroes on this nation, and we have something very interesting that I wish a lot more nations had. Let's start with the Harpy Queen. She is like a special Harpy. She summons in extra Harpies in your Dominion, which is nice, just free units. She does have air magic, which we otherwise don't have. And at air 2, she can go out and site search up some air gems for you. She's flying and stealthy, so she's good at doing that. Despite the fact that she breaks you into a new type of magic, we don't have any other mages to take advantage of it, really. So that's kind of hero there, but always good to have a hero that gives you a new type of magic to search for. She gives you free troops. Totally fine. She's all right. Not a fighter or anything. We have the Blessed Couple. This is an interesting one. It's a centaur and his love of a, well, dryad, I think, technically. Interesting units. They are Water, Earth, Nature 3, Holy 2. They have a lot of the traits that we've seen on everyone else. Stealthy, Poison Resist, Awe, Berserk, Recuperation, Beastmaster. They do have innate Spellcaster, which is pretty nice and unique, although you're a little fragile for a unique hero unit, so going into melee to cast spells, a little iffy, although at least you have decent buffing paths if you do end up there. You are wearing decent armor on him. I think on this one I can't show her, but if he gets killed, I believe she hops off and still can do some of her magic. We are Unsurmountable 1 because she can help, watch his back, essentially. It's totally fine. If you get this early, it is probably what I go out and site search with. I do this and then a Glamour 2 Mother Dryad. So can make your site searching very easy. Stealth site searches are always appreciated. Very nice. And finally, we have a White Minotaur. Now, the really cool thing about this, okay, so he is a Priest level 2, and otherwise he has pretty standard Minotaur stats. Trample, Berserk, Force Survival, Recuperation, Inspirational. He has a Battle Axe, and he's quite strong at 18. He's wearing the leather hauberk, but he is I believe it's called multi-hero. He is not unique. So you'll get Bob the White Minotaur, and then you'll get Charles the White Minotaur, and then you'll get Victor the White Minotaur. You can have multiples of this guy. And he's got 100 leadership, which means you can now put your non-undisciplined troops into formations. And we have troops that could actually benefit from being in formations, along with our inspirational +1. So he's going to end up giving you a +2 to morale, which is way more than anything else you can do. And yeah, Holy 2 is great. He is almost as fast as your Sacreds, so he could lead Sacred groups. You'll have the best morale that you could get on them, and you'll be able to bless them decently with a Priest level 2. In my test game here, I am in... Now, I did go with Fortune 1, but I am in Fall of Year 2, and I've had 3 of them spawn with a Fortune 1. Right here, Fortune 1. So, I quite like that. I think that's pretty cool. I wish every nation had at least one, at least medium to mediocre multi-spawn hero, because this is just cool. I like nations that get things like this. If you're a nation that has like that one hero unit that has similar things like this, where he's just a good leader and he's like a little bit tough, well, he just dies and then that's it. Like, whatever. But for this guy, you can actually use him. Like, you could put some gear on him if you felt like making it cool, or just have him as a good blessed leader. So I quite like this guy. All right, moving up here. As for national items, we have no national items. As for national spells, we have several. First one I want to look at here is in Conjuration. At Conjuration 5, we have Monster Boar. This is the remote ritual which summons a Monster Boar event in a territory, and it will cause unrest and bad event things going on there until the enemy goes over and patrols them out. Not my favorite spell ever. However, we have easy access to people who can cast it. We have tons of nature income, and we do have some unrest type things that we do with our satyrs. So if any nation's going to use Monster Boar, I do feel like it is actually going to be Pangaea. So that's something at least. Next up, let's go look at enchantment. Okay, these are the national spells mentioned in our national overview. We have the Tune of Fear, Tune of Growth, and Tune of Dancing Death. These are kind of unique in that they are level 0 spells. There are some nations that get things like this, but it's not a common thing. And at Nature 1, we have many mages who can cast these. All of them have in common relatively short ranges and okay costs. So, Tune of Fear, area of effect 25 is huge. It only costs us 5 fatigue. We can do Fear 3, so a max of minus 10 morale penalty. That's a lot of morale penalty. It's armor negating unit. So essentially, it's centered around the caster, though. So you're going to probably have to be on advance and cast spells, so it's hard to script. But if somebody runs up and starts spamming this, I'm happy enough. They can do it all combat for 5 fatigue cost and spook some things away. So thumbs up for me there. Next up, let's look at Dancing Death. Again, area effect 25, 5 fatigue cost. It causes 31 plus fatigue damage. This is quite good. One round of this and you've already caused an enemy unit to start taking stat penalties. So if you have a few Nature 1 mages that have nothing else to do, maybe you throw Bark Skin on them and just advance and cast spells. And you hope they go up there and start casting things like this, because this is quite potent. And it's magic resist negates, so things with low magic resistance are going to really struggle with this. Monkey Nations fear Dancing Death, that is for sure, and Fear. And finally, we have the Tune of Growth. Again, area effect 25 is very big. Fatigue cost is only 5, so it's super cheap. And the damage is Entanglement. So this is like Tangle Vines or Vine Arrow Shot. Quite good. It doesn't say on here that these are affected by growth scales like the other aforementioned spells do, but it would not shock me if they were. So it would make the difficulty to get out higher based on the growth of the province you're fighting in. But quite good. And remember, when you get entangled by something, you lose almost all of your defense. So if you're fighting troops that your other guys are struggling to hit, we don't have any net access or anything. This is a very efficient spell to tangle people up and then let them get chopped up. So quite nice there. Next up, we have Awakened Hamadryad at Enchantment 5. This one's okay. So the Hamadryad we've had on Arcacephaly and other generally like Greco-Roman nations. It auto-summons some harpies. It's in a mobile thing. It's not very good at researching. Comes in at 3 nature magic. Throwing one of these in a fort is a thing. Like, an assassin would not be able to kill this, so it could soak assassination attempts. Otherwise, though, I don't know. And on some nations, it's kind of nice because you don't have tons of nature access, so maybe this is going to help you do something. For this nation, I don't know if it really does much for you. All right, next up, we are going to look at Alteration. Alteration 0. So again, you start the game with this. You do need a Nature 4, but we can recruit Pans, which are guaranteed Nature 4s. We have a Ritual Grow Fortress. For 35 Nature Gems, you could just grow your fortress in a forest. Forget about 1,500 gold to build it yourself. You take a forest, you build a lab for 300 gold, and then you instantly drop a fortress. Quite nice. And it is, I believe, the same fortress that you would end up building anyways. So, very good. I would definitely do 35 gems for 1,500 gold. And you're just done. Like, you don't have to wait for turns and turns and turns and turns. So if you get lucky and you have a throne in a forest, you can take the throne, claim the throne, and put a fort up on the next turn. And you're done. You've got all your infrastructure ready. Now, it does require forest or shallow seas, so you can't just do this anywhere. So that's unfortunate. This would be very powerful. You could do this just anywhere. In my test game, all my forests were bordering my capital, and I didn't have any I wanted to actually use it on. So that was very disappointing. and unfortunate. Okay, so let's bring it together with strengths and weaknesses here. So we have very high nature income and mages that are powerful enough to cast big nature rituals. So we have a nice synergy there. And we have a ritual to grow fortresses. So in 6 turns, you can buy a fort with just gems, and just gems from your capital. You've probably site searched some other nature gems up. That's pretty darn nice. We will have blood access. Not great, but you have some. And you have blood sacrifices, which, again, not great for you, but in an emergency, you can push out some Dominion. You have very usable troop lineup. They're not the most powerful things, other than maybe the Sacred, but they're good at what they generally do, and they have a decent mix of, we have a good archers, we have a little on the weak side for line troops, but we have some good stealthy raider things, we have decent javelins, we have a really strong Sacred, we have a relatively easy to recruit roster, meaning that they don't cost tons and tons of resources or even recruitment points, and a lot of them can be recruited from any forest. We don't even need all the infrastructure. So in my game, even though I didn't get those early forts, I at least could pull up 5 to 10 of these guys, and then when other armies would pass by, I would just pick them up. You can recruit an entire stealthy raid party from a forest that has no infrastructure. So you have lots of ability to put out lots of little armies. Not the best armies, but lots of little things that can go harass people or build up and then pop out somewhere where people aren't expecting them. We have a flying scout, another good strength. We have bog standard average okay research. So we get that 1 research per 10 gold. So we're not the fastest, but we can get up cheap temples and labs, so we can get them out. They're all sacred, so they have okay upkeep costs. They're fine. We have a very light, thuggy guy that's usable. We have some seduction shenanigans, which is kind of cool. We have a very strong mage. Nature is a very strong path. We can do all the good nature things that you would want to do in combat. And you can self-buff with Strength of Gaia up to a nature 5. Throw a Thistle Mace on him, you're a nature 6. You can just cast nature spells all day, every day, forever. Never going to run out. A good lineup. Now, our weaknesses here, we don't have a heavy troop. We don't have a great line troop. We're more of a hit-and-run type nation or a horde type nation. We don't want long, grindy combats. That's not what we would prefer. And while we have really good nature and we have enough earth, aka we can earth embrace up to Earth 3, which is kind of like the bar for being useful with Earth and getting buffs out. So they're totally serviceable. And we get enough of those. They're not super rare. And we have a smattering of some glamour, which is interesting. I don't think I've gotten to the point where I use that super effectively, but I think it's there. You have the nature glamour crosspath, and there's a few spells, especially in evocation, I believe, that use that, like Elf Shot, which is a long-range fatigue spell. You have some sacred archers, which you can sometimes do some shenanigans with. You have inspirational leaders. Lots of good things there. Lots of good things. And while we have weaknesses, it's nothing like glaring. Like, I can't get on land, etc., etc. Or I have no good recruitable leaders except a cap-only guy. So, very versatile. We can get troops out from lots of different places. Overall, good troop lineup. We have some bonuses for cheaper infrastructure, which is always nice. I think, overall, thumbs up. Very good. All right, let's talk about blesses and chassis. Pangaea has many options for different chassis, mostly the kind of the Greco-Roman-ish people, and I think many of these are viable. The White Centaur is such a strong sacred unit that many blesses will be good on them. They're survivable enough that you could just go heavy on the offense. They are offensive enough that you could just go heavy on the defense, or any combination therein. Now, unfortunately, they are cap only, and we don't have any sacred summons of any type or anything. So, how much you want to bless them and put all of your eggs in that basket, I'm not certain. But I think you have tons of options here. You could go with a Blood Surge, you could go with Awe, you could go with Fear, you could go with anything that ups your defense or your protection. Tons and tons of options here. I quite like that. I think an Awake Expander would be useful enough. You could beeline some forests, and then you could summon in your infrastructure and really get ahead of other people. And an early advantage for you is good because you have cheap infrastructure in that case, and you can get lots and lots of troops out. Even though our troops aren't the best, we could just swarm people with numbers before they can build up good solid armies and have good magical counters to us. Early game advantage can snowball pretty well, and that leads into like Awake Expanders. And because our White Centaurs are so versatile, I mean, if you went with like a Hound of Hades and you gave him like hard skin and some extra, I don't know, HP or something, that would be okay. That wouldn't be the best bless for White Centaurs, but it'd be okay. It's usable. You could go with like the Drakon. That's another fun one. Hard skin regen. That'd do White Centaurs just fine. Tons and tons of things here. I think it's more about what blessing you're interested in. This used to be a favorite of mine before, the Lord of the Wild. He does some monster summoning shenanigans himself. However, do note that we already have turmoil and growth scale increases, so you get nothing from those. And to me, that just feels bad. I don't like that. I kind of sort of wish that those stacked, but I understand the reasoning that if they did, everyone would feel forced to pick those type of chassis so that I could go turmoil 4, growth 4. But I think you could go many ways. You want to go sloth, but you could take this guy and go sloth 1. That'd be totally fine if you wanted to, I don't know, lean into like some extra crafting for some of your almost thuggy things. You could go in a mobile and just really lean into having a good bless and try to take advantage from your sacreds. You could go with just the cheapy little Dominion 1 guys. We do have a couple, or maybe it's just one unique. We do have this Centauride Enchantress, so while she is not particularly special, I mean, she's stealthy. It's something, I suppose. Not one of my favorite special ones, unfortunately. But I think there's tons of options. It's going to be based on your bless. So I will show you the example of what I did in this test game. So I went with the Sacred Geyser. I would have preferred a fountain, but we don't get the fountain, unfortunately. But I went with just quickness and attack skill. We were awake. We ended up with 5 Dominion, 3 Sloth, 3 Turmoil, 2 Sloth, neutral heat scale, 3 growth, 1 fortune, 1 magic. These absolutely destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Remember, our White Centaurs have 2 melee attacks, so quickness will double that up to 4. And quickness will also give you +2 to attack and +2 to defense. So now you have a 19 defense sacred and +3 on their attack. So, can I not get into my nation from here? Yes, I can. So that, I feel like that's a very good bless. It doesn't do overly much for your sacred mages, but the White Centaurs are so good that this just carries it, in my opinion. You could go vampiric weapons. You're tough enough to survive some hits, and you have multiple attacks, which is kind of what I feel is the necessary amount to be able to use that. Blood Surge, amazing. Go in there with your lance attack, get your kill, get your Blood Surge rolling, and just ride that into the sunset. Blood Surge and regen. We do have some nature blood chassis that are available. So, like the gentleman here I was disparaging earlier, that's a blood nature chassis just that you have. You also have the Mother of Monsters. Another cool one. She has Dominion Monster Slayer. She is an adept crossbreeder, and you do have a little bit of blood, so maybe that's a thing. I mean, she's got it really high too at 10. And with death magic, nature magic, and blood, I'm sure you can come up with some interesting blesses here. Now, she is pricey. So at 240 points, you're going to be hell scaling yourself probably, but maybe that's worth it to you. You could even go something really cheap, like we grab Irminsul here at 140 points, we give ourselves regen. Boom, we're done. That's usable. Monolith, we could go with, I'd probably still go regen, magic weapons, and that's probably it. I would use Earth to pay for that, but you could give them some Earth stuff, some reinvigoration or some hard skin. We could go with one of our glamour guys, and we could give them blur or awe or fear. I mean, the possibilities are endless. We have such a good sacred chassis. I'm really curious what other people like on this nation. It's other than a few test games here, it's been a very long time. I played Pan a lot early in my Dominions 5 playtime, and I burned myself out on them. I liked them so much, I played them several times, and I just burned myself out. And Pangaea is such a cool nation. They make it all the way. There's a late age Pangaea, and we have some cool splinter nations that happen. So again, those are the type of nations that I just like, that have a full story to them throughout the ages. So quite nice there. So to wrap that all up, Pangaea, a very fun nation, as their name, Age of Revelry, would tell you. I think they're somewhat flexible. They're decent. One thing of note here, if you've never played nations like this before, watch out for armies that are totally stealth, and make sure when you're moving, are you planning on stealthing, because that's the default, or do you want to actually attack? Keep that in mind. Even in my test game here, twice, I meant to reinforce with some troops, and I stealthed them in, and they didn't show up to important battles. And I lost one of them, which was an important battle because of it. I had a big group of sacreds which were supposed to be there, but I stealthed them, so they did not enter the fight like they were supposed to. So if you're new to that, just keep that in mind. Be very careful. Double check your movement orders on them. Great nation. A little more complex than some others I would necessarily suggest to a new player, but I think they would be totally fine. If this is up your alley, I think you're going to have a great time playing them. And I believe Pangaea does pretty well in multiplayer too. You're strong without being overpoweringly so I don't think you're a first target for most nations, although they may covet your 6 nature gems. So just be prepared for that. Okay, builders, that's going to be it for my pregame of Pangaea, Age of Revelry. I'm super curious to hear what people have to say in the comments. I'm sure these guys have enough flexibility that there's cool strategies I haven't thought of, cool army comps I haven't thought of. Maybe a way to make this guy or your Pan very thuggy could be quite cool. What's your favorite bless to put on white centaurs? I have a feeling people are going to tell me a ton of hell blesses. I am generally not a hell blesser, but I do appreciate the art. All right, I will see you on stream, builders. Have a good week.